What's up, guys? This is Toad back with another edition of Better Off Dead college football. Week 5, at least I believe it's week 5. Seems to be going pretty fast, but staying up late, not sleeping, being a total degenerate, getting these bets in, getting these videos done. I got an NFL video coming up next after this. And by the way, if you guys want me to discuss, break down, discuss opinions on games that I don't have quite a strong an opinion on, games that I don't talk about, don't have plays on in these shows, let me know at Tower Gang Toad on Twitter, or you can comment on the videos. I'll try to be responsive and let you know what my opinions are if I have them on other games. And I apologize for the bad stretch that I've been on recently. Baseball has been brutal. The last couple of baseball plays, I took today off, but last couple of nights, man, situations, both games where I went the full game on them, and even though I liked the starting pitching matchup, which is always a factor, I didn't really have that much of a reason to not trust the bullpens in those games, but both games, I had the lead like late. If I had made them first 5-inning wagers, I would have won both of those bets, and they wound up both just losing late. The Padres game a couple nights ago against San Francisco, where Blake Snell pitched really well like I thought he would. They had a 1-0 lead, which of course isn't insurmountable or anything, but looking pretty good. In the 8th inning, they wound up giving up 2 runs, losing that game, pretty brutal fashion. And then yesterday was way more brutal with the Chicago Cubs, where Justin Steele did pretty well like I thought he would. And they had a 6-0 lead into the 6th inning. How do you blow a 6-0 lead in the final few innings of the game? But that is exactly what they did. They wound up losing 7-6. Absolutely brutal. And they out-hit, who are they even playing? I don't even remember. The Braves, of course. The Braves didn't really have any reason to be motivated in that game because they've already pretty much locked everything up, locked like the entire NL up basically. But the Cubs out-hit the Braves 13-8, I think, in the game. And you out-hit a team 13-8, man. You don't have much of an excuse to lose that game. And when you have 13 hits, there's not much of an excuse to only score 6 runs off of that either. Like, leaving way too many men on base. I don't know what is up with that. Just absolutely brutal. And speaking of brutal, my college football last week, I liked all 3 of those plays, obviously. Like midway through those games, they were all games that were in like the 7 p.m. slates. They were all being played kind of at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Looked like all 3 of them might win, and I was pretty happy. It was looking pretty good. Middle Tennessee was winning into the second half, and they wound up letting it slip and just wound up losing the game. Don't know how Colorado State was able to pull that off, coming off that Colorado loss the way that they did. Don't know, man. But these situations, they tend to work out more often than they don't, at least. But then I had the Memphis play where they looked like they were going to be within the number, and they were for a lot of it, and it just wound up landing right on the number. If you got the best number, the 7, like I did, a push. Still didn't feel very good. Felt like they should have covered that, and hopefully you got the 7 and not the 6.5, which would have been a pretty brutal way to lose, just like in the other game that I had, the plus 6.5 on Mississippi State, which I don't know if there were ever any 7s out there in that one. Didn't see any, but that one, Mississippi State, looked like they were doing well, looked like they were going to cover that potentially. They were within the number, and then late they let it slip to a 2-score deficit, and then it looked like they were still potentially going to get in the back door there. They got into scoring range near the end. If they had scored a touchdown, they would have gotten back within the number, but they wound up kicking a field goal and missing that by half point. Just absolutely brutal. Brutal, man. So let's get to the college football plays I'm going to be talking about this week. You guys might think some of these are ugly. Maybe not this one, because I'm going with an undefeated team here. And how do you get value on an undefeated team? Well, maybe I'll tell you. Syracuse plus 7 is what I'm going to be talking about here. And this number actually, it was 7 earlier today, and I got the 7, but I think the 7s are actually gone, so I apologize for that. But I think I would still take it at plus 6.5. I do like the situation a lot with Syracuse here. But as you can see here, it's kind of a result of, it looks like the majority of the tickets and the money, and more of the money than the ticket count on Syracuse there, which I think is what's kind of driving that number to come down a bit. At least according to Pre-Game's Game Center here, which I think it's a pretty good resource. As I mentioned, I use it every day pretty much. But what's going on here? Clemson versus Syracuse. This is a bad spot for Clemson, man. Clemson, they're coming off what's always like one of their biggest games of the year. They're coming off Florida State. Florida State's highly ranked team, very highly ranked this year, top 4 or so or whatever it is. And Clemson had the lead in that game, like very late in the game. And this is a Clemson team that's been kind of, not as good this year. They really got dominated by Duke in week 1 and didn't look very good there. Kind of righted the ship a little bit, but I think played 2 easy games to get the 2 wins. So then they come in, they play the Florida State game. They get hyped up. I think it was in Clemson, in Death Valley. Clemson had the lead by 7 with like a few minutes left in the game. They wind up allowing the game-tying touchdown, I think with like almost no time left. Florida State tied it, sent it into overtime, and then I think Clemson might have actually turned it over in overtime, and Florida State scored and won the game, I think on I don't remember if it was a field goal or a touchdown, but they won the game in overtime after having tied it right at the end. So it was like Clemson was right on the brink. They had the win almost. They were minutes away from the win, have that ripped away, and then they still have overtime to try to do it, and they don't do it. This is just going to be, I think, a hangover spot here. I don't know how you get up off the mat, really, if you're Clemson. After that, you have to go up to the Carrier Dome, which is not really an easy place to play, even though Clemson has kind of had the upper hand against Syracuse because they have been, the much better football program. But Clemson, I think, is a little bit down this year. I think in a lot of cases they're kind of they have the number, like they're being favored by as much as they are because they are Clemson, because they have the name recognition here. But Syracuse 4-0, but I think the feeling is going to kind of be, well, who have they played? They haven't really played anybody. And last week they didn't really look very good against Army, and they kind of barely got by Army. But Army it's a tough game to play against Army when you don't see the triple option all the time. They throw that at you. It can kind of throw you off if you're not prepared for it. And Syracuse, of course, had this game up next, which is a much bigger game. They get to play Clemson, who's a team that's like usually kind of in that national championship picture. So I think Syracuse is going to be hyped up for this game. I would have to imagine. They get the home game. It's a noon start, so it's going to be a bit early. Get that tailgating done early, man. And the other thing I think that's going to factor in here with Clemson is that was the Florida State game was Clemson's second loss. And if you're Clemson, you're a team that expects to be like in the college football playoff picture, if not like vying for the national championship pretty much every single year. And if you realize that you're not this year with that second loss, that is pretty much gone for you. So that's another thing, right? I think that's kind of like a dream crusher type of scenario where the goals that you had set out to do for the season, your season goals, those have just been ripped away. They've been taken away. And for Clemson, it's happened pretty early. But I think that's just another factor here where they might be like a little bit down, a little bit hungover after the way that huge game played out. So I think it's a down spot for Clemson. Hopefully the 7s might still be around, but the way the market looks, I don't know if the 7's going to reappear. I like Syracuse plus the points, plus 6.5, I think is fine as well. I think it's kind of a big number. I like the home dog here in Syracuse. And yes, as usual, as I say, if you're taking the underdog, especially an underdog, it's like a single-digit underdog like this, I tend to like to put like 10% of the bet on the money line, sprinkle that a little bit on the money line, plus, 200 or so probably is what Syracuse is getting there, the 2-1. So then if they happen to win outright, which there's like, you're saying, if you think they're going to cover the 7, there's like a decent chance they might win the game outright. You'll get that like little bit extra. Like, I always feel bad if I have an underdog that I play and they win outright and I don't make that, like, little bit of extra. Even though if they miss, you'll, like, lose that little bit of extra. I think it plays out well, like, in the long term if your handicapping is good and if your underdogs do have, like, a better chance to win than what the odds are telling you. It winds up working out pretty well. So Syracuse plus 7 is the first play. The next play is probably going to be the ugliest one, man. Nobody's going to want this. Buffalo +3. I don't even know why I'm doing this to myself. How can I do this, man? Buffalo, they're one of the worst teams, possibly one of the worst teams in FBS. But you can see here, they have 62% of the money coming in on them, even though 58% of the tickets are on the other side on Akron. And the number has actually gone up, although I don't know if that was like an early opener on the 1.5, but it's gone up through actually the 2.5, because I found a 3 out there, although I would still take Buffalo at 2.5. I think it's probably fine too. But I found the 3. If you can find the 3, I think I would do it. And this is mostly a play against Akron, but Buffalo, man, they're 0-4. They haven't done anything right. They haven't looked good at all. But Akron, this is going to be a play against Akron. I don't think Akron is really that great of a team this year, but what happened to Akron last week is like the whole reason for this play. They played against Indiana, so it was actually their second game in a row against a big conference school. The week before that, they played Kentucky, but they got drilled by Kentucky. Kentucky, just the much better team. But then Akron got to play Indiana last week, and Indiana was a 16.5-point favorite or something like that against Akron, and Akron battled them, man, right until the end. Not only did they battle them, but the game went 4 overtimes. So you can see here, and they wound up losing the game by 2 to Indiana in 4 overtimes. So they were that close to pulling off an upset, a double-digit upset against a big conference team. That would have been huge. They were in the game the whole time, pretty much, winning the game for parts of it, and then they had the lead in overtime. And then what happened is they wound up actually losing in the 4th overtime on a trick play, where I think Indiana had their quarterback, Jackson, line up as a wide receiver. They snapped it to one of their other wide receivers. He pitched it over to Jackson, the quarterback, who then threw it to Carter it was a 2-point conversion in that case once you get to the 4th overtime. So it was a trick play. So if you're Akron, man, like how do you get up off the mat after that? You played 4 overtimes. You almost had the win against like a bigger conference. This was kind of your biggest game of the year because you're going to be playing all MAC teams after this. So like after a huge game like that, how do you get back up off the mat, man? Kind of similar to Clemson in a way, where you had this like crazy like overtime game, almost pulled off a big win against a bigger school. Well, in Akron's case, a much bigger school, big game, and it just gets ripped away from you right at the end. You were so close to having that huge win. I think Akron, they're not in a good spot here at all. They're in a really bad spot. Buffalo, they haven't been able to do anything right. So I think you're getting value on Buffalo just because they have not won a game. They haven't really done anything. So it's like, what are you going to do? Buffalo, they got to have the motivation, man, just to try to get that first win. And finally, they get like a game that is going to be a winnable game, because I think they've been big underdogs in most of their other games. Maybe not the Liberty one, I don't remember, but this finally you see like, hey, we got a winnable game. It's like almost like a toss-up line here. I like Buffalo. Akron in that bad spot after that 4 overtime game. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that one. Next one, even though, like I said a couple weeks ago when I took Wyoming +30 or whatever it was, a huge spread there, I tend to not like playing games with huge spreads like this. But in certain cases, I'll make an exception, and in this case, I will. This is Oregon against Stanford, and you can see everybody's going to be on Oregon. Oregon is kind of the hype train of the week now, and you can see 96% of the tickets, 91% of the money, all on Oregon. Push the number from 23 up to through 27, and I got 27.5. It might even get to 28. Like, you could probably wait on this because there's not much of a difference between 27.5. Not really that much. If you think you might be able to get the 28, maybe I would say do it. The 27.5 I think is fine. I took that. This is all about fading Oregon here, though. So Oregon, we know what they did last week. They faced Colorado, who, as you know, I'm not a fan of Colorado or the hype that's been on Colorado, because I think that they are not anywhere near as good as the hype would lead you to believe. And last week we finally saw that as Colorado came crashing down to earth, and Oregon really came to play in that game. And Oregon was really putting in a max effort that whole time because they wanted to embarrass Colorado. Like they did not pack it in that game, even though they were up 35-0 at one point, and they scored another touchdown. And I think they went for it on 4th down to get that touchdown. They were just really trying to stick it to Coach Prime, stick it to Colorado there. Oregon just wanted to light them up, man, and they almost were able to shut them completely out, but Colorado was able to get like a garbage touchdown like right near the very end of that game. But Oregon put in an effort for almost that whole game. That was a big game. They wanted to come in and just say F you to Colorado, basically. Like, you're not as good as the hype, which, of course, I agree with. Oregon is a physical team, which Colorado had problems with there, and they just came in and they just destroyed them. So after that, this is like a letdown situation, man. Like, that's like your big high of the season. How do you maintain that high after that when you have Stanford up next? Stanford, team that hasn't really done anything. Nobody's paying attention to them. They haven't looked good. You're a 27.5-point favorite. You're the way better team. But you got to go on the road here to Stanford. It's not necessarily going to be that easy of a game. Stanford, on the other hand, has reason to get hyped up because they have now a top 10 ranked team coming to their house, so they're going to want to perform well. This is like a get-up game for them while it's a down spot for Oregon. And it's even worse for Oregon because it becomes a sandwich play because what do they have next? They have ranked Washington, who's one of the best teams in the Pac. What is it? Is it the Pac-12, the Pac-10? I don't even know what it is now. The Pac-12. Like, I don't even know how many teams are left in the conference. I don't know what the conference realignments are even doing to this way. I don't know who's in what conference at this point, but Oregon has Washington next, and that's going to be a big game. Washington has been lighting it up, scoring a ton of points as they have Mike Penix, Mike Cock, I believe is their quarterback. Terrible name, Penix. He's been like really lighting it up for Washington, so that's a much, much bigger game on deck for Oregon. This is a sandwich spot. It's a down spot. I don't see Oregon being completely focused and motivated for this. Stanford getting all these points. I think they might be able to come in within this number, man. Like, this might be a game where Oregon just kind of wants to get in and get out because they just put in that huge effort last week to annihilate Colorado and embarrass them on the national stage. And they got the huge game against Washington next, which is also kind of just a rivalry in general between the two teams that are across the Columbia River from each other, basically. So that's it for that one. Stanford plus 27.5, and these are all Saturday games, and we're getting into these two are Saturday night. The first two that I mentioned, Syracuse and Buffalo, are noon Eastern, I think, Saturday. These two, Stanford and Duke, are the Saturday night games, and Duke, I think, is actually the national college game day game. Duke, I like Duke here, and I'm saying plus 6. The number's actually gotten up to 6. Duke is hosting Notre Dame. You can see here, even though Notre Dame does appear to have more of the money coming in on them right now that's driving the number up, I've seen other sources, like I use the Action Network, that actually show the discrepancy not being like that, and the discrepancy actually showing that less of the money than the tickets are on Notre Dame. So I don't really know, but I just know that I like the situation here quite a bit, and this number has continued to go up, so it's like whatever. The number's gonna go up to 6. I'll take the 6. 5.5, I think, is fine too. 5, whatever. Those are like dead numbers. But if it's up to 6, you can find the 6. I would take the 6 on Duke plus 6. And what do we have going on here? Notre Dame, man. The story here is Notre Dame. What can you say, man? Everybody saw what they did last week. They had a huge game against Ohio State, 2 ranked teams. That's kind of a rivalry because Notre Dame kind of tends to play all those like Big Ten teams, and those are some of their bigger games. Notre Dame, I think they're not even a conference team now. They're like an unaffiliated, independent team now, but they are ranked. But the way that they lost that game, I've said it with like most of these other games here, the Buffalo and the Syracuse. Notre Dame, just like with Clemson and with Akron, like, how do you get up off the mat after what just happened last week? Notre Dame was on the verge of winning that game. They had the game won, basically, against Ohio State, and then Ohio State wound up being able to get that score right at the end, that touchdown, and then, I don't know, some weirdness where there was a second left and they had to kick the extra point. I always thought that if you score a touchdown in the last play, you still had to kick the extra point, just to kind of make you have to do that, because there is that possible chance that, like, I don't know, it would be blocked or something in return for a 2-point conversion, and then the game would wind up going into overtime. That would have been really wild, but of course, Very rare that would ever happen. That did not happen. Ohio State had the really dramatic win with that touchdown basically on the last play right at the end. And then Ryan Day, their coach, who just seems like a complete lunatic. He's got the the Rogaine beard. His beard is just all dyed up. He looks like he's completely insane. He looks like an alien person, like a fake person, basically like a jock who like used to be like nice and jacked a little bit back in the day. He's out there and he's threatening to beat up Lou Holtz, who's probably like 100 years old now, the former Notre Dame coach. Lou Holtz, probably, I don't even know what Lou Holtz had said prior to the game or whatever, but he obviously always picks Notre Dame and whatever and likes Notre Dame because he's a former Notre Dame coach, Notre Dame guy, so I don't know. But Ryan Day was just losing his mind, and it was really crazy and insane to see. I don't know what the hell, I don't know what any of that even was, but Notre Dame, the way you lost, man, and additionally the way they lost, they didn't even have their entire defense out on the field for, I think, the last 2 plays of the game. They only had 10 men on the field. It's just completely embarrassing, man. Like, you have the win in your grasp, and you don't even field your full defense, and you lose on the last play. Just absolutely brutal. Notre Dame, I don't think, has been as embarrassed since Manti Te'o got prolonged catfished by a dude pretending to be a woman. The second to that, this was probably the most embarrassing moment in Notre Dame history, or at least in the last couple decades of Notre Dame football. Just completely insane that you wouldn't even have your full defense out there for those. Notre Dame's got some stuff to work on, some coaching to work on. And that's what I'm talking about here, fading Notre Dame here, because now they go to Duke. And like I said, I believe this is the College Game Day game. And Duke, they're not known for their football, man. They're known for basketball. But I think it's a rare scenario that College Game Day is going to be there. So I think it's going to be extra hype, extra motivation for Duke. They have a big name team, a ranked team coming in, even though Duke is also ranked and undefeated. They're the underdog at home. They got College Game Day coming in, big name, Notre Dame coming in. I think this is, it just looks like Duke is the right play to me, man. Notre Dame kind of in that hangover spot there. Duke hasn't had a big game since week 1. When week 1, they played Clemson, even though, as I talked about, it looks like Clemson might be a bit down this year. But Duke absolutely dominated that game against Clemson. And since then, they've had some easy games against lesser opponents there. But Duke... this is not the typical Duke football team. Like, when people think of Duke football, I mean, they don't even really think about Duke football, really, even though they've been okay recently, made some bowls and stuff. But you don't think of Duke as having a good defensive football team, and that is exactly what they have this year. They held Clemson to 7 points. They have a good defense, man, and Notre Dame's got some offensive issues there. Duke especially is really good against the pass, but Duke has a really good defense, and their offense is actually pretty good as well. Like, I think as a football team, they're kind of more known for having like a decent offense. Their offense is pretty good. Again, it's a balanced offensive attack, man. They have a good rushing attack and a good passing attack, and I think they average so far this year over 200 passing and rushing yards per game. So it's that nice balanced attack. So if you're a defense, you're not going to know exactly what to focus on. If you take one of those things away, Duke is going to be able to do the other thing. So all of that in mind, bad situation for Notre Dame. I think more motivation going to be on Duke's side. Duke is getting all those points at home. Duke +6, baby. Hell yeah. That's going to do it for the college football edition. College football week 5 of Better Off Dead. Again, we got... the 4 plays really quickly against Syracuse +7, even though I think it's down to 6.5 everywhere. I like it. I still like it at 6.5. Buffalo +3, Stanford +27.5, and Duke +6. That is going to do it. I'm Toad, Better Off Dead. I'm Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. You can follow me there, and I am on the Tower Gang podcast. We're the most offensive comedy podcast in existence. So if you like that, it's much different from this show, although I'm as autistic as I am here on that show and in real life and every second of my life. So you can check it out, follow me, drop me a message if you want to talk any of these football games, any sports betting. I love to do it. Obviously, I can't shut up about it. I get super autistic about it. That's going to do it, man. Better Off Dead.